Talk a little bit about the poll numbers and whether we can trust them as we get a sense of where Democrats versus Republicans stand in the lead up to the November polls.
I think you can trust midterm polls generally better than you can trust presidential polls because not as many people turn out. And as a consequence, you don't get the folks that are, sort of the wild card voters. You don't get people who are much more untraditional, who you may not be able to capture as easily in a traditional survey. Look, Trump's approval ratings have been remarkably consistent in the year and a half plus since he's actually been inaugurated. But the relative softness of Trump's support, how strong people are that say they like Trump in being committed to him, has, I think, reduced a bit since you've had this, sort of drumbeat of much more defensiveness from Trump, from the books, from the anonymous op-ed, all the rest. And the fact that Trump himself doesn't seem to want to be responsible for the midterms, is talking more about the potential of rigging, implies to me that he's not, even with all of the rallies he's doing in Montana last night, the rest, he's not doing as much to ensure that the people turn out. So, I mean, if you're making a bet right now, you're probably betting Democratic momentum in the House of Representatives come November.
If you're a Republican, do you think that, President Trump mishandled the John McCain funeral? Do you think that he's still doing good on tax? What do people go and vote on in the midterms?
If you're a Republican, you're probably most unhappy about the budget under Trump, which feels like a Democratic budget. It basically blows out the deficit. It looks like bigger government. It's harder to reconcile with what Republicans really stand for over the long term. You might be a little bit concerned about undermining the FBI and law and order. Again, traditional Republican concerns. On most other things domestically, Trump is doing what you want. Certainly tax reduction, especially on the corporate side, but also for wealthy Americans. Certainly on regulatory rollback. Certainly on the Fed appointees, which have been pretty moderate down the board Republican, certainly on the judicial side, which has been quite aggressive, and also on immigration. So I think domestically, Trump is probably 90% aligned with the Republican agenda. Internationally, that's much less the case.
Oh, do you worry about central bank independence? He was tweeting about Jay Powell and hikes. I mean, you could see a situation where the Fed gets dragged in politically in 2 years. You have a recession, and President Trump, if he's still president, says, actually, it's all your fault, Jay Powell. What does that mean for the Fed?
I don't worry about Trump's tweets very much. And I think the fact that he's managed a couple tweets and one odd statement about Fed independence and not liking, sort of monetary policy, I don't think it's something he pays much attention to. It's not something he talks about internally. If you look at all the tell-all books, including Woodward, you don't see him saying, here's what I think they need to do with the dollar. You hear him saying a lot about the deficit. You hear him saying a lot about trade deficits with other countries, with trade deals, saying a lot about North Korea, Iran, that kind of thing, about immigration, about race. You don't see him talking much about the dollar. So I'd be really surprised if undermining Fed independence in the U.S. Here's where I said if Erdogan and Trump, on terms of paranoia, Erdogan has one of the greatest damage Erdogan's done to Turkey and its economy has been truly undermining the independence of the Turkish central bank. In the case of the United States, Trump has done absolutely nothing.